an unwanted visitor. The mist-shrouded hunting moon of Velhura 6 had remained sacred and inviolate for over 1,000 cycles, a sanctuary where only the fiercest and most revered hunters of the Vekari Dominion were permitted to tread. It was here, amid tangled jungles of bone-white trees and creatures bred only for the bloodsport of the Vekari elites, that the stories of heroes were written and carved into the Hall of Skulls. That piece fractured the moment an alert rippled through the Dominion's war nets. A lone human vessel, old and scarred by asteroid dust, had pierced the outer defenses and descended through the sulfur clouds of Velhura 6. At first, the High Huntsman scoffed. What could one frail human, soft-skinned and short-lived, hope to accomplish here? But then the name of the intruder surfaced, passed from the data priests to the ruling circles, growing darker with each retelling. His name was Tarek Holt, a former mercenary, smuggler, and rumored war criminal. Whispers claimed he had once decimated an entire hunting pack on Cygna Prime, turning their own traps and war beasts against them until only the carrion crows remained. Other tales spoke of a man who walked unarmed into a contested zone and emerged days later, the only living being among mountains of the dead. The Dominion's arrogance faltered at those stories, but only briefly. Velhura 6 was their pride, their proving ground. No human, no matter how cunning or cursed, will be allowed to defile it. The High Huntsman decreed a challenge worthy of legend. They would send their 12 greatest hunters, each a living nightmare in fang, claw, and cunning, to bring back the human skull as tribute to the ancestors. Deep within the shadowed halls of the obsidian fortress, the horns of the hunt sounded. Steel-tipped boots marched in unison. Ancient rituals were whispered over bone-carved weapons, and 12 hunters set out into the eternal mist to track the unwelcome visitor who dared trespass on Velhura 6. The challenge. The proclamation echoed through the grand audience chamber, its obsidian walls etched with the triumphs and deaths of generations past. At its heart, beneath banners woven from the hides of conquered leviathans, stood the High Huntsman himself, a towering figure draped in the regal red of the Dominion, his voice a low growl of barely contained fury. To allow a human to walk Velhura 6 unchallenged would be to stain the very bones of their ancestors. It would invite mockery from rival empires and rebellion from within. Word spread swiftly across the Dominion's far-flung worlds, carried on encrypted war chants and heralded by the piercing cry of the Bonehorns. In the shadowed training pits and labyrinthine sanctuaries of the Hunters' Guilds, 12 names were called forth, names known and feared in equal measure. Each hunter answered, their scars and trophies testaments to a life of unrelenting pursuit and bloodshed. There was Saruk the Void Tracker, whose eyes were replaced with spectral lenses that saw heat and soul alike. Velka, the Beast Caller, draped in the scaled pelt of the obsidian hydra she had slain and enslaved its offspring. And Jorik Twinblades, whose curved swords had tasted blood for more than 200 sentient species. Alongside them walked assassins whose poisons blackened the stars on contact, trackers who could trace the wake of a fleeing insect in the wind, and silent predators who had spent years among the feral shadows, becoming myth to their prey. Together, they were an embodiment of the Dominion's pride, a ruthless circle forged from centuries of conquest and ritual. Before departing, each hunter knelt at the altar of the Great Hunt, pressing bloodied palms to the sacred stone and vowing to offer the human skull and heart to the ever-hungry gods. Within the hour, 12 drop pods howled through the sulfur skies of Velhura 6, trailing crimson fire. Each hunter carried a blade honed over generations, weapons of bone, metal, and secrets. They had slain warlords, rival champions, and the spawn of cosmic horrors. Yet none had faced a lone human like Tarek Holt, whose very presence dared them to question the invincibility of their ancient creed. The living jungle. Valhalla 6 was more than a hunting ground. It was a breathing labyrinth of death, cultivated across epochs by the Dominion's gene shapers and war biologists. Shrouded in a perpetual, silver-gray mist that curled between towering, bone-pale trees, the jungle concealed dangers both ancient and newly wrought. The air itself pulsed with a low, almost musical hum, resonance from the subsonic cries of predators unseen but always near. The 12 hunters moved as shadows among shadows, each step calculated, each breath measured. Underfoot, the ground shifted unpredictably, veins of creeping lichen coiled around ankles, while sinkholes yawned silently, eager to swallow the unwary. Spined creepers the size of serpents draped from twisted branches, dripping paralytic sap that shimmered like quicksilver in the filtered light. It was not only the flora that conspired to kill. Deep within vine-choked glades, obsidian-scaled stalkers waited with patient malice, their hearts beating in sync with the moon's shifting tides. Hulking goruks, beasts of living stone and corded muscle, crashed through thorny underbrush, driven mad by the scent of fresh blood. Above, in the canopy where the mist thinned, shrike birds the color of old bone circled silently, their beaks sharp enough to pierce metal. To the hunters of the Dominion, Valhalla 6 was both temple and test. They read the subtle signs left in broken twigs, the disturbed patterns of the mist, the half-faded heat signature of a footstep on living moss. They whispered silent prayers to the gods of the hunt, who, they believed, watched from behind every gnarled branch and mirrored pool. Yet as they tracked deeper into the jungle, a strange pattern emerged, trails that led nowhere, footprints that ended abruptly at cliff's edge, and crude snares of vine and sharpened wood, placed with deliberate cunning. Somewhere ahead, Tarek Holt moved unseen through the living jungle, shaping the wilderness itself into an ally. The mist thickened in his wake, blurring the hunter's vision and turning every shape into a possible phantom. Underestimation. In the data slates projected across their helms, Tarek Holt appeared almost laughable. A lean, weather-worn figure clad in faded combat fatigues patched and repatched beyond recognition. Across his back hung an old projectile rifle, primitive by Dominion standards, its battered stock wrapped in cracked leather. A single worn blade rested at his hip, its edge dulled by years of use rather than the gleaming, gene-sharpened weapons the hunters carried. To the 12, who had each felled armored colossi and crushed rebellion worlds under heel, Holt seemed pitifully mortal. His movements, captured by the brief flickers of thermal scans, were slow and deliberate, lacking the fluid grace of a Vekari predator. His body language spoke not of arrogance or divine rage, but of weariness, a traveler too long at war with the universe. In the calm net that bound them, the hunters exchanged quiet, humorless mockery. Saruk the Void Tracker promised to bring back the human's scalp as a trophy, while Velka the Beast Caller whispered she might set her Hydra spawn upon him, if only to watch the fear kindle in his eyes. The youngest among them, Koresh of the Twin Shadows, voiced impatience, seeing in Holt not a rival but an insult to their sacred art. To them, this was not a trial of survival, but a chore, a swift slaughter to uphold honor, to silence the murmurs that a single human could trespass upon Valhalla 6 and live. They imagined his last moments in vivid detail, cornered, trembling, his primitive rifle clattering uselessly to the mossy ground, eyes wide with the realization that humans, so fragile and brief-lived, could never hope to defy the hunters of the Dominion. They did not see the quiet deliberation in Holt's slow pace, nor the faint marks in the mud left not in flight, but in deliberate misdirection. In their certainty of his weakness, they failed to see what lay hidden in every step, every pause, every patient breath drawn deep within the choking mist. Predator becomes prey. It began almost imperceptibly, a single misstep in the ancient rhythm of the hunt. Jorik Twinblades, famed for cutting the breath from his quarry before they could scream, felt the soft crunch of rotting bark beneath his boot. Before he could shift his weight, the earth itself betrayed him. A pit cunningly concealed by leaves and spined vines yawned open, swallowing him into darkness. The muffled snap of bone echoed once, then silence reclaimed the jungle. The others barely had time to register the loss before the jungle seemed to close around them, as though the mist itself had become Holt's accomplice. Footprints appeared in places no living thing could have stood. Low whispers curled through the fog, carried by the shifting winds, taunting, guiding them into thickets dense with hidden snares. Velka the beast caller, for all her mastery over scaled horrors, found herself leading her hydra spawn straight into a crude corral of sharpened stakes. The panicked shrieks of her beasts shook the canopy, masking Holt's approach until it was too late. A single, quiet shot from his battered rifle dropped her to the moss, her command severed, her creatures left thrashing blindly in terror. The remaining hunters, each a sculpted killer forged by centuries of tradition, tightened their formation, speaking less, breathing shallower, fear threading into their hearts where there had only been scorn. Yet the jungle offered no safety. Holt's traps exploited the terrain's every fold. The mudslides he triggered from above, the vine-strung branches waited to break bones, and the sudden flare of old, chemically soaked leaves that blinded the void tracker's spectral sight. Through every calculated strike, Holt revealed his true strength. Not brute force, but patience honed into something predatory. He knew the rhythm of fear, the way it grew in silence and exploded in panic. Each kill was not just survival. It was a message whispered into the hearts of those who once believed themselves untouchable. Fear spreads. The Dominion's 12 greatest hunters, once confident and cruel in their certainty of triumph, began to sense a truth that pressed cold against the backs of their minds. Tarek Holt was no cornered prey. He was the quiet footstep behind them, the shifting shadow at the edge of their vision, the patient breath that seemed to echo their own. They found the evidence etched into the jungle itself. Where they expected desperate flight, they discovered deliberate placement, a series of shallow footprints guiding them toward a quicksand hollow, a broken branch hinting at a false trail that ended at a spike-lined ravine. The fog grew thicker around their campfires, swallowing the light and leaving only the imagined outline of Holt's gaunt face just beyond reach. Sleep became a distant hope. When they dared to rest, eyes half-lidded and weapons drawn, strange noises prowled the mist, pebbles displaced, dry twigs snapping underfoot, the faint scrape of a blade against bark. They awoke to find hunting companions missing, their armor and weapons scattered in the underbrush, blood seeping into moss as testament to silent ends. The Comnet, once alive with grim boasts and ritual vows, fell into uneasy quiet. Each hunter spoke in hushed tones, avoiding words that might admit what gnawed at them all. Holt was not fleeing them. He was shaping the jungle around them, narrowing their paths, corralling them like livestock for slaughter. Even the bravest felt the slow tightening of dread, a growing awareness that they were no longer masters of the hunt. In the breathless stretches of the mist where nothing moved, each began to see Holt's patient eyes watching, waiting. The Dominion had sent them to claim his skull, but the deeper truth had become undeniable. The human had turned the sacred grounds of Velhura, 6, into his own hunting ground, and they had become the quarry. Flashbacks. In the quiet between heartbeats, as Holt lay motionless beneath the fungal overhang of a rotted tree, fragments of memory surfaced like old scars reopening. He remembered the red skies of Kalak Prime, a colony meant to be humanity's new dawn on the frontier. Instead, it became a tomb of twisted metal and burning fields. Alien raiders had come, without warning, carving through defenses meant only to deter, never to withstand. Holt, barely more than a boy then, had watched friends vanish under strafing runs, their laughter replaced by charred silence. In the chaos, discipline dissolved. Officers died first, and command fell to whoever had the will to keep breathing. Holt had that will. Hunger hollowed them, fear burned them, but he learned the language of desperation, how to bait an enemy patrol with scraps of movement, how to turn the terrain into silent allies, how to sleep with one eye half open and a hand wrapped around cold steel. Weeks stretched into months. The colony's lush valleys became killing fields where every step risked an ambush, every fire risked artillery. Holt and the handful who followed him stopped fighting to win. They fought simply to deny the enemy peace. When rations turned to dust and water grew foul, they ate roots and drank from streams that tasted of rust and blood. And when finally the rescue ships descended through smoke-choked skies, they found only a ragged band of survivors whose eyes had grown as sharp and unyielding as broken glass. Holt never spoke of what he'd done to stay alive, but in the silent hours of the Velhura mist, those memories walked beside him, step for step. It was in that ruined colony, amid ruin and betrayal, that Tarek Holt had become something more than a soldier, something that understood patience, the slow coil of resolve, and the art of becoming a ghost among enemies who outnumbered and outgunned him at every turn. The final confrontation. The mist lay thickest in the low-lying clearing, swirling like restless spirits over moss slick with dark, congealed blood. Branches overhead hung heavy, dripping dew and remnants of violence onto the scarred ground below. It was here, driven by desperation and a last ember of pride, that the two surviving hunters made their final stand. Saruk the Void Tracker moved with mechanical precision, spectral lenses flickering as they scanned for the faintest pulse of heat or tremor of movement. Beside him stalked Koresh of the Twin Shadows, twin blades drawn, every muscle coiled with lethal intent. Each step squelched softly in the sodden earth, their breathing ragged with exhaustion, yet braced by determination to reclaim the honor slipping through their bloodied hands. Bodies littered the clearing, comrades whose prowess had been legend among the Dominion. Velka, throat opened in a single brutal cut, the silent predator impaled by his own spiked trap, and Jorik half buried beneath fallen stone. Their deaths were neither quick nor careless. Each bore the unmistakable mark of deliberate, patient malice. The mist thickened, muffling sound and sight alike. Shapes danced at the edges, phantoms of motion that vanished when confronted. Koresh hissed a curse into the commnet, voice raw, as Saruk's lenses scanned left and right, reading nothing but the still heat of their fallen kin. And then, breaking the hush, came a voice, low, calm, tinged with the quiet fatigue of a man who had seen too much to fear anything more. "You shouldn't have come." The words rolled from behind them, soft as falling ash, yet heavy with finality. In that single moment, centuries of Dominion arrogance met the cold resolve of a human who had become the hunter they could not outwit. Saruk's lenses flared, and Koresh spun, blades glinting in the pale half-light, as the clearing seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would come next. No mercy. Koresh lunged first, twin blades carving arcs, meant to slice Holt in half before he could vanish into the mist again. But Holt had spent a lifetime surviving men faster, stronger, and crueler than this last scion of Dominion pride. With a practiced sidestep, he let the blades whisper past, his battered rifle swinging up not to fire, but to strike. The cracked wooden stock slammed into Koresh's temple, the force dropping the hunter to his knees as blood dripped into the moss. Holt did not pause to savor the moment. A swift, ruthless thrust of his blade slid between the plates of Koresh's ornate armor, severing life from body in a single, clean motion. Koresh crumpled forward, blades falling from limp hands, eyes frozen wide in stunned disbelief. Saruk, fueled by equal parts fury and fear, raised his spectral lenses to fix Holt's heat signature, only to find the jungle betrayed him. The warmth of a dying comrade, the steam rising from disturbed earth, and the smoldering wreckage of a triggered trap blurred Holt's presence into ghostly echoes. A heartbeat later, Holt was there, close enough that Saruk could smell the rust and sweat of worn fabric. The hunter reached for his ceremonial dagger, but Holt's hand clamped around his wrist, twisting until bone cracked like dry tinder. Saruk gasped in pain, and Holt drove the blade into the gap beneath the hunter's chin, pushing until the trembling stopped. The Dominion's last great tracker toppled silently, eyes dimming behind fractured lenses. Holt stood over the bodies, breath slow and steady, shoulders rising and falling without haste or triumph. There was no hatred in his gaze, only the grim necessity of a man who understood that mercy was a luxury long since stripped away. His movements were deliberate, methodical, as if finishing a task already decided by the simple fact of his will to endure. Emerging from the mist, at dawn, the pale light filtering through the towering bone-white trees revealed what the watchers above had scarcely dared believe. The dense veil of mist parted slowly, curling back from a solitary figure moving through the undergrowth, each step unhurried, despite the weight of exhaustion pressing on battered limbs. Tarek Holt emerged, his clothes torn and stained with mud and blood not wholly his own. Cuts and bruises traced angry lines across weathered skin, and one arm hung stiffly against his side, bound with a ragged strip of cloth torn from a fallen hunter's cloak. His rifle, scarred and pitted from days of relentless use, rested across his shoulder, the cracked stock darkened by sweat and old blood. Yet there was something incongruous in his expression, a small, tired smile tugging at the corner of his mouth, not triumphant but resolute. It spoke of a quiet satisfaction born not from conquest, but survival, not of defeating foes, but of refusing to break when everything around him demanded surrender. From concealed perches high above, the Dominion's war priests, data scribes, and high-ranking hunters watched in stunned, reverent silence. Their 12 greatest had vanished into the jungle to hunt a single human trespasser, and now only the human returned, bearing the weight of what he had done without apology or fanfare. The mist closed behind Holt like a curtain falling at the end of an old tragedy, the sacred hunting grounds swallowing the remnants of those sent to end him. For the first time in living memory, the Watchers of Velhura, 6 were forced to witness a truth their ancestors had never dared to write. The prey they had hunted had become the one to walk out alive. A message delivered. At the jungle's ragged edge, where scorched vines gave way to mossy ruins of an ancient hunting shrine, Holt paused, breath ragged in his chest. The dawn light, pale and unfeeling, spilled across broken stone tablets etched with Dominion victories older than human memory. Slowly, deliberately, he knelt before the largest slab. its surface stained by the blood of countless sacrifices offered to the gods of the hunt. From his belt, he drew a battered combat knife, its blade chipped from days of use against scales, bone, and armored hide. With each scrape of steel against stone, flakes of ancient dust scattered into the dawn breeze. The carving was not elegant, the letters uneven from the tremor in Holt's worn muscles, but the words cut deep enough to outlast time itself. When he stood, sweat and blood mingled on his brow. The message remained behind, stark and undeniable against the dark stone face. Leave Earth be. No curse, no boast, no elaborate warning. Just a simple, resolute statement of what would not be tolerated. A quiet promise carved by a lone human who had turned the Dominion's pride into grave markers. A man who had chosen survival over surrender so many times that the choice had become his only language. High above, hidden eyes and lenses recorded every stroke, every breath, every moment of this final act, as the jungle mist slowly began to reclaim the stone and the message it bore. A humbling realization. In the shadowed halls of the Dominion's obsidian citadel, with the trophies of 1,000 hunts lined walls of bone and iron, the silent procession of war priests and high huntsmen gathered around flickering hololiths that replayed the hunt's final hours. Each ghostly projection showed the jungle swallowing their champions, the cunning traps sprung with brutal precision, and the lone human emerging from the mist, bloodied but unbowed. The chamber, once alive with the growl of boasts and the clink of ceremonial blades, fell into a silence so profound it pressed against the ear like deep water. Generations had been raised on the certainty that humans, for all their stubborn spark, were fragile creatures, clever enough to build machines, but doomed to break when faced with true predators. Yet in Tarek Holt's patient cruelty, his refusal to run, and his calm hand as he carved his warning into sacred stone, the Dominion glimpsed a truth older than their own conquests. Humans did not endure because they were stronger or faster. They endured because they were willing to become what survival demanded: patient, ruthless, unrelenting. And in that willingness lay a danger beyond any beast the Dominion had ever bred. Prey that could turn hunter, prey that learned and adapted, prey that refused to accept the role assigned to it. In the cold glow of the hololiths, the Scions of the Dominion saw, perhaps for the first time, that the deadliest creatures in the galaxy were not the ones born with claws or scales, but those who could not be made to kneel. In the end, the hunt on Velhura 6 became more than a test of skill. It became a legend retold in hushed voices even within the heart of the Dominion's greatest citadels. The jungle, once a sacred proving ground for the Empire's mightiest hunters, bore silent witness to their fall. Not at the hands of a rival champion, nor a monstrous beast of genetic perfection, but at the hand of a single human who refused to be cornered, refused to break, and refused to run. Tarek Holt did not emerge as a conqueror wrapped in glory, but as something far older and simpler, a survivor whose strength lay not in superior weapons or inherited ferocity, but in patience, cunning, and an unbreakable will. He left behind no grand speech, no blood-soaked banners of victory, only a rough, quietly defiant message carved into ancient stone: leave Earth be. For the Dominion, that message struck deeper than any blade. In Holt's calm brutality, they saw a glimpse of what humanity truly was. Creatures shaped by loss, tempered by hardship, and capable of turning the darkest corners of the universe into battlegrounds where even the proudest hunter could become prey. And so, while the Empire's historians wrote of the hunt as an unfortunate defeat, those who truly understood whispered a different truth, that somewhere beyond the mist and blood of Velhura 6 walked a man who proved that survival itself can be deadlier than any blade, and that sometimes the soft-skinned creatures they once dismissed as prey could become the deadliest hunters of all.